And if a guest has a child who is not tall enough to ride, they are not tall enough to ride. And if they say, well, it's okay, they're just under the line, or it's okay, I'll hold their hand, or I'll sign a waiver, or it's okay, we'll go to the bathroom and stuff their shoes with toilet paper and come right back. And I'm not making up any of these.
No.
These happen very often. The guest is, in all sense of the word, wrong.
The future of fun begins at IAAPA FEC Summit, January 19th to the 21st, 2025 in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Join FEC and LBE professionals for an immersive experience packed with strategic insights, networking, and behind-the-scenes EDUTours of unique local facilities.
Learn how to make your FEC stand out in a crowded market and explore the latest trends designed to elevate your business.
Build valuable connections and leave inspired with actionable strategies for success.
Click the link in the show notes to reserve your spot today.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast.
Hey, Josh, how are you?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome.
Thank you for saying you're welcome. And how are you?
I am fantastic.
Just got to keep you on your toes.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I don't want to assume that you're going to ask, but if you do, I've got the answer ready.
Okay, good.
Every time. But I have a question for you.
Okay.
Is the customer or guest always right?
Yes. Well, this has been a great episode, and we are all in the last episode when we talked about the resolutionary episode, one of my 2024 resolutions was to take comedy classes and engage the audience. That's part of my opener that gets the audience laughing right away. I won't spoil what it is. So if you haven't seen me on stage and you see it, then you know that's one of the first laughs that I'm seeking is about whether the customer is always right and whether we like or agree with that phrase. And no, there are many instances where the guest is, objectively speaking, in all sense of the word, wrong. With that said, the way that we address it needs to be very tactful. So if, let's say, it is related to safety. I've been a ride operator. You've been a ride operator. I'm guessing many of our listeners have been ride operators. Many have not, but in rides, there are often height restrictions. And if a guest has a child who is not tall enough to ride, they are not tall enough to ride. And if they say, well, it's okay, they're just under the line, or it's okay, I'll hold their hand, or I'll sign a waiver, or it's okay, we'll go to the bathroom and stuff their shoes with toilet paper and come right back. And I'm not making up any of these.
No.
These happen very often. The guest is, in all sense of the word, wrong. However, it should be looked at and treated as a service recovery scenario where you have an opportunity to make that guest satisfied, make them maybe even sometimes think they are right, allow them to be right, at least in the words and their feelings that they are expressing, while at the same time without compromising very strict policies and procedures.
Well, that was a much longer answer than yes or no. A very serious answer, one that I'm guessing is not the way that you present that to get a laugh in your presentations.
People accept the part about I'm going to go to the bathroom and stuff my kids' shoes with toilet paper. Like that is like
that's a little funny.
That is inherently
true.
funny.
It's
like,
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the reason I bring that up is because I know that obviously you're a big service recovery guy, which I think if you don't know it by now, if you're listening to this, this is Josh's thing. But I also know that you've got some new things that you'd like to share with the audience and maybe kind of talk through a little bit.
So one of the things over many years of doing guest experience consulting, where I see as being one of the biggest sticking points or biggest friction point within any organization has to do with service recovery, complaint resolution, and has been a very strong area of focus of mine, has been a very strong passion of mine since I was in grad school studying guest service management at the master's level and looking at the academic research that was done on this, while at the same time I was a leader in a guest communications team in a destination theme park that was opening the largest theme park attraction opening of all time. Yes, I'm talking about the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. And like going to school and seeing the research and going to work and then actually doing it and really kind of, connecting the dots and maybe leaving a trail of breadcrumbs and then taking that with me. And then when people started reaching out to me for things like customer service training, that became a very big part of the conversation. And in any workshops that I've done, the part where the most hands go up and the room always comes to life, and it's the part that I usually have to cut off in the interest of time, has to do specifically with service recovery. So I've taken all of that, all of the consulting that I've done, all of the, I would say the research that I've either done or at least studied, condensed it down, and I have created an online course that is completely self-paced. It is designed specifically for the attractions industry, theme and amusement parks, water parks, family entertainment centers, zoos, museums, aquariums, really everything under the attractions, tourism. I would even broaden out to say hospitality umbrella, but really for the attractions industry. And I've called it Service Recovery Hero. And that course is officially available if you would like to access it and be able to really craft your service recovery strategy. Because here's the thing, you've got a marketing strategy, you've got a finance strategy, you've got an operational strategy. Maybe you even have a service strategy, but do you have a service recovery strategy that allows you to methodically put in a system that helps streamline your operational process, knowing that guest complaints are a natural part of the business?
And you even say that we should be getting more.
We should be getting more.
Yeah.
Yes. You're not getting enough complaints. Your guests aren't complaining enough.
Enough.
Yeah.
So real quick aside, I've seen Service Recovery Hero in print. I've probably even heard you say it before, but when you said it then, what came to mind, and this is a total tangent, was Jukebox Hero by Foreigner, the song. So if you could get the rights to Jukebox Hero and use that as your theme music, I think that'd be amazing. Okay, now you can go on with your.
I did select some pretty awesome theme music, but that's a really good point. Just to have that subtly, with stars in his eyes, right? So
yeah. Anyway.
I thought it'd be fun to take this episode and talk about some components of service recovery strategy, all of which are in the course, but to give kind of some guide rail framework on what a service recovery strategy really looks like.
Well, and I'm excited to dive in, but I also have a feeling that there's some people that may have had a light bulb moment when you said service recovery strategy and aligned that with financial strategy, marketing strategy, hiring strategy, all these different things. Because to your point, this is a natural part of business. It's a part of business that we should have some sort of strategy for, but I feel like not many people do. So with that, let's dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, even to touch on that is, I think the reason why a lot of people don't is that they include it as part of guest service. And the natural inclination when a guest complains oftentimes is, let me get my manager. And it escalates to leadership, which ultimately is disruptive to operations. Who loses when a team member says, let me get my manager? Everybody. The guest loses because now they have to wait. They have to probably repeat their issue again. They're stalled out. The team member loses because they feel less empowered. They're disrupted from their routine. And the manager, the leader, you're running payroll, you're building schedules, you're putting out a fire over there. The more that can be put into that service recovery strategy, this helps your operation. It helps satisfaction, but it also just helps the natural flow of the business in general.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what's the first one?
All right. So the first one acknowledges something that we just mentioned a minute ago, and that's that your guests aren't complaining enough. So it is about putting your feedback collection system in place. I have distilled down all the different sources where feedback can come from and really put them into 4 main buckets. They're not buckets, they're pillars. These are 4 pillars of guest feedback. And I call them pillars because they are load bearing. This is important. Internal feedback that comes directly from guests. That could be on-site feedback. That could be where the guest says, who can I speak with about my issue? Maybe it is that guest services desk or booth or office that you have, or maybe it is the feedback that employees are collecting. Offsite, it could be your private communication channels of making sure that if I go to your website, I know exactly whether it's a phone number or an email address or a contact form, or are your social media DMs open? Meet me where I am, where my communication preferences lie, to be able to speak up when I have a concern. The reason why your guests aren't complaining enough, well, not the reason why, but the justification behind it is that research shows that less than 4% of people who have an issue are actually going to speak up about it. So it's true. Your guests really aren't complaining enough. Every complaint you get represents at least 25 other people who had the same or similar issue and didn't speak up about it. So the better you can have your internal feedback channels in place, the more guests can voice their concerns when they feel that they need to. The second pillar is through internal surveys. So this is actually about prompting guests for feedback. This can be done on site through, some people are doing intercept surveys with a person with a clipboard and a sheet of paper and stopping and offering a popcorn cotton candy coupon. Could be survey kiosks as well to be able to collect quick hit information, or post visit as well, prompting the guest for feedback. It could be very specific questions that you're asking them. It could be a combination of open-ended. It could be a numeric scale to 1 to 10. Net promoter score falls into the internal survey category. Any way that you can prompt your guests for feedback, either on-site or post-visit. The third part of it is through mystery shops. And this is something that I've always been a big advocate of, because this allows you to get granular into specific areas of your guest experience and your operations that those other channels aren't able to get, because they're probably not going to point out how many employees were wearing a name tag, or very specific time, place, location, this team member, this is how this interaction went. So you're able to get very specific information from guests who are visiting anonymously with the goal of providing constructive feedback, not to complain, but to provide opportunities for continual improvement. And the last one is about public feedback. So this is where online reviews and social media come into play. Now, one negative review online can turn away up to 30 prospective guests. So you can do the math on that of the actual tangible revenue impact that happens with every negative review that you get. But the way that you manage your online reviews and your social media can help bridge the gap between your service recovery strategy and even tie it in with your marketing strategy, and ideally convert those guests offline to get to you so you're able to recover directly from them.
That's that's a lot. That's good stuff. That's good stuff. And I appreciate
that was only some of it.
I know. But I like the fact that you're calling them pillars. Because I'm guessing this is going somewhere, but it also gives me a picture in my mind, of something that is formidable in a good way, So yeah, continue.
And it holds up the strategy. So
there you go.
Second part of it, pretty important, training your staff on complaint resolution. So many people that I talk to, they say we don't include service recovery training as part of our guest service training, and therefore by default, frontline team members are asked to say, let me get my manager, let me escalate this issue. By default, that is the operational process. We talked about a few minutes ago how disruptive that can be to the operation. So the more you can train your staff on service recovery, on the complaint resolution process, the more streamlined your business operations can be. Now, one of the things I talk about a lot, and I have an entire module just on this in the course, is on the last model. Now, I used to call it the LATAST model because of how important the step between listen and apologize are. I've tightened it up a little bit, so I still just call it the last model, but it stands for listen, apologize, solve, and thank. And so this linear process is what the employee can go through with a wide variety of service failures. This can be used if the guest drops their popcorn. I have used it for guests who have threatened national media coverage or lawsuits, and by the end of those phone calls, they are satisfied. They are satisfied with the resolution process. So this is about the conversational flow. This is the art of service recovery. This is the hospitality component and ensuring that the guest who's in a very heightened emotional state can be acknowledged, whether they're right or wrong, and get to the end of that conversation feeling satisfied.
Well, and really the last model is about conflict resolution, right? So if I could just for a second bring in the intersection of the guest and employee experience,
Yeah.
you can use the last model with your employees if something's going wrong with them, right? They're hot under the collar about something. They've got a bee in their bonnet about something, and that needs to be addressed. Listen to them, apologize or acknowledge, and then you can solve it and thank them at the end.
Is a bee in a bonnet a good thing? I've now heard it in a couple different contexts.
Right? Well,
only from you.
Only from me. That might show my age a little bit, but basically the way I look at it is the bee in the bonnet is something that it's on your mind. It can be maybe a little annoying. It's driving you to do something. You want to rip that bonnet off your head because you got a bee in there. So it's absolutely action oriented.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate the clarification.
You're welcome.
So the third component here that I want to talk about, and this actually dovetails nicely from training team members. If the last model is about training, then your empowerment piece of it aligns with your recovery toolbox. So if team members are trained on that conflict resolution process and that conversation, then in the solve portion of the last model, what are they doing? What are they allowed to do? What can they do without needing to escalate to leadership, without needing to get permission? And one of the things that I talk about with the recovery toolbox are a few different components. And first, recognizing that there is so much that you have to offer that has such high value to your guests, but such low cost to the business, especially in the experiential industry that we are in. If you give away an admission ticket, so a ticket to come back another day, the value to the guest is what you would normally charge them for that ticket. If you refund their money, it is the same value to the guest, but the cost to the business is entirely different. So the cost to give that admission ticket is zero, or if you're printing it, it is literally the cost of that flimsy cardstock piece of paper. That's your cost of recovery, but the value is so much higher. If you give that refund, that is low value to the guest because it doesn't actually solve a problem, but also very high cost. So giving a refund just cancels out a transaction, doesn't actually fix anything. So even when the guest says, I want a refund, well, you're not going to refund them their time that they spent visiting you. You're not going to refund them the tank of gas to get home or their hotel room or their airline flights or all those ancillary expenses. So the actual admission refund is pretty much worthless to that guest and has a direct hard cost to the business. So we want to look at high value, low cost. You also want to look at things that are experiential compensation. So things that maybe are not things that you would necessarily charge for or cost money to the business, but still things that high value to the guest. And then think about things that go into effect in the future. So you get the guest thinking about their next visit.
So I had a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Do you find that guests will say, I want my money back because they don't know what else to ask for, and that the only indication that they've actually been there is the fact that they paid money?
I do think so, yeah. of just, this was a bad experience, therefore I want a refund. And the guests will think that they are satisfied.
Mhm.
But are they? Like, is someone going to rave about a recovery process because of how well their admission was refunded? It's more so we had such a bad time, I had to demand a refund.
Yeah.
It's not a better story. It's actually a worse story.
There are situations where that I've actually been in where the monetary return was a surprise. And that was actually, it actually helped the situation. For example, at a restaurant, right? And you're eating and stuff like that, and something goes wrong with something, and the waiter comes and they give you the bill and they say, oh, there's something not on here. Our dessert's not on here. Yeah, we comped that because of blah, 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 blah. To me, and I don't know if this is part of what you're getting at, like in terms of empowerment, but to me, that because they did it in that way, it wasn't just like they were giving me money back, but they were saying, we recognize we did something wrong. You still got the dessert. Something else was amiss, and this is what we're doing to fix it. So go ahead.
That also has to do with when the payment happens.
Yes.
Because in a restaurant, you pay at the end.
Yes. Yes.
Technically, the dessert was not refunded. The dessert was never paid for.
That's correct.
So that was the recovery of adding the dessert onto that. And then by kind of crafting it as a little bit of a surprise moment, that actually created a little bit of a wow experience of, oh, I hadn't anticipated that. That
Right.
was nice of you to do that. Not, thank God you refunded that dessert because of how bad an experience I had.
Exactly. That's a
Yeah.
good point. That's a good point. Yeah, I like the way you twisted that around, but it made a lot of sense, right?
Well, in twisting it around, I know that sounds like almost like manipulative, but it is reframing perception.
Mhm.
Really what that's about, and kind of helping to alter their perception towards what they're going to see as satisfaction, and you might see as justifiable recovery.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can we talk about empowerment just for a second?
Sure.
Because I have found that from a leadership perspective, people will say that they're empowering their team, but they really don't. And a lot of times it's because all they're doing is saying, I'm empowering you, but they're not giving them the tools, the resources, the confidence to actually do the things that they are trying to empower them to do. So when you have that solve portion of the last model and you've got all those different things that people can do, if you just tell people what they are and you don't give them an opportunity to practice, you don't train them, as you've said, then they're probably still not going to do it. So empowerment takes time. Empowerment takes effort and energy. I remember back when I was, kind of coming up as a leader, and, one of my, upper level leaders would say, well, we empowered the team members. Why aren't they doing it? And it's come, it's come to my attention over the years that we didn't really empower them. We just said they could do stuff, but we never gave them the tools to be able to do it. So I think that's a really important piece. And I'm glad you brought up empowerment, because that needs to be kind of taken very seriously when we think about how we're doing that and what we're empowering them to do and how we're empowering them to do it, if that makes sense.
Well, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because there are a handful of clients that I'm working with now that say they are empowered, like they're able to do so much without asking permission, but they don't have that confidence in doing it because they don't want to break the rules. And we're working on trying to shift the message of saying, not only can you do this, but we kind of need you to. We kind of need you to break the rules in the interest of guest satisfaction. So then that pulls back. And there was a conversation I was having a while back with somebody of saying, well, you need to create the policies around how to break the rules. And so your empowerment needs to be documented. It's like, here are the rules. Here's what we need you to do when breaking those rules. And here's the framework and the structure in which we want you to do. That is part of your job duty, is service recovery.
Absolutely.
So that ties actually kind of nicely into the next piece, because if you're going to train your team members on the last model and on conflict resolution and empower them to be able to recover and actually compensate guests when they need to, you need to make sure that you're managing the process effectively through documentation. And that's done for a couple of reasons. One is to make sure that the team member is using their empowerment responsibly. And if there are instances then that they're not, those are coaching opportunities to say, let's talk about the way that you gave this guest, these 14-day tickets to come back when their fries were cold, right? But but also allows you to also make sure that guests are not abusing the system. So you can identify if you've got a repeat offender of somebody who's coming and complaining about the exact same thing every single time and getting the exact same thing every single time. This is oftentimes where empowerment or recovery, where people can be against service recovery because they say, well, we don't want to train our guests to complain because they're going to get X in return. Well, no, you do want to train your guests to complain. And especially if your recovery toolbox allows for high value, low cost, experiential compensation that goes into effect in the future. If the guest thinks that they're abusing the system, you're actually winning because all those tie in with revenue generating service recovery. But if it comes to the point where now, okay, here's just the same thing happening on repeat, you can say, well, you were here last month and complained about this and we did this. You were here 3 months before and said, and we did the exact same thing. What else can we do to help you? What else can we do to help resolve your specific issues? And here's what we're doing with your feedback that you're providing us. The other thing that it does as well is helps you to track recovery efforts, which allow you to really aggregate feedback to be able to identify your biggest priorities. And I'll be talking about that as we actually kind of continue into this. But the documentation portion of it is critical.
Absolutely. Well, and it reminds me of back when I was at Universal and you were at Universal, and we would talk about somebody who went to Mel's Drive-In and the burger was cold or he didn't like something or whatever, and he kept going back and going back and going back. And so your first thought is, why you keep going back if you're but maybe we have trained them to come in and maybe the recovery or the resolution was always the same. And he knew he could essentially get a free burger if he just went up and complained about it. And then they refunded that amount of money. So I think the toolbox or the toolkit analogy, I think, is really valuable because it gives you more things that you can choose from. But also, I think the documentation helps to empower the team member because now they're taking a look at, okay, here's Josh. He's back with his family. And the last couple times he's been in, this is what he's complained about. So he's still coming back. So there's something there, right? He's complaining about the same thing. So maybe we haven't truly resolved it, or we've kind of created a situation where he feels like he can come back or needs to come back to make some sort of resolution. What can we do differently? So I think there's a future case to be made of how can we do this differently, better, more efficiently, not only for you, but also for the company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that also kind of ties in, with the next piece as well. And this is the offsite guest experience component. And this is about equipping your guest communications team. And, I'm working with a number of clients on this right now of really helping to button that up and knowing that service recovery is a very big part of any organization's guest communications team, or maybe it's an individual person that's designated to be responding to guest feedback in whatever channel that it's coming in from after the visit, after the experience. They are on the front line of service recovery. They need to be trained on the last model. They need to be fully empowered. And the guest communication strategy as part of service recovery allows you to continue engaging with guests after their visit. One of the pieces that I'll highlight with it as well is responding to public online reviews and social media, knowing that that's one of the biggest pillars of guest feedback and guest feedback strategy. Is when you're responding to a review online, You take a similar approach to the last model, but you have to modify it a little bit because you're in the arena. And the response that you are giving to that complaint is not only responding to the person who wrote the review or who made the post, but also to everyone else that's reading that, who's seeing what your response is like. So you want to be very careful to validate their concern, validate what they are expressing, right? I am disappointed to read this review because what you are describing does not meet our standards. Maybe the guest was wrong. Maybe the guest is lying. With your phrasing like that, the way that you address that review does not say, we don't agree with you because this doesn't align with how we operate. It's, this does not meet the standard that we expect. And if we fell below that standard or your expectation, we apologize for the inconvenience, and I want to speak with you more about this. One of the things that makes me cringe all the time when I see a response to a review is when the response says, sorry that you had a poor experience. We hope you come back and visit us again soon. And that is copied and pasted on every 1 and 2 star review. There is no effort for service recovery. No, please do not do that. I would like to speak with you personally regarding this matter. My name is Josh. Call me at this number. I look forward to your call. If I'm not available, here's the case number. Like, leave all that in the response to the review to show the urgency to say, we're going to resolve this. I do not recommend offering recovery directly in the response directly. Some people do. Some people said, hey, we're going to give you free tickets to come back. Oh, cool. I'm going to write a negative review now, right? But to say, like, we're going to address this, please call me at, when you're able to. So if I see that, if I'm scrolling and I see the bad review and I say, okay, how did they respond to it? Now I can see, okay, they're taking the steps to make it right. And this wasn't typical what this person is saying.
So this brings up an interesting question, because I've seen some reviews recently where the response is actually much longer than the complaint. And it was interesting because it almost seems like, and the response was good. I think it follows a lot of things that you're talking about, but it raises the question, did they need to go that far? Like, if the complaint wasn't that detailed or bad or, that kind of thing, like, is maybe the question is it possible to over communicate or over complicate things when it wasn't that big of a deal in the first place?
I think it depends.
Okay.
Were they trying to scramble and say, like, the reason why the lines were longer is because we are short-staffed due to recruitment challenges, and our college students have just gone back to school, and rest assured that we're doing everything we can and we're doing our right, or is it, I appreciate your level of concern for the care of our animals. I'm happy to provide you with what our standard is and the things that may happen behind the scenes that we understand that perhaps you didn't see. And then maybe like a little bit of context there. And if you want to learn more, you can click at this link. And I'm happy to talk to you about this more. So call me and we can sort this out together. So, I think it depends, on the nature of the review and the nature of the response. And did it look like it was copied and pasted? Was it a template that was filled in as well? So I think it kind of goes into those particular factors.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So the next piece is planning for the worst. And there's an entire module in the course on the obscure, irate, and unreasonable, because that no matter, when I'm doing a workshop and I say, we go through the last model, and then somebody raises their hand, well, what if this? And I'm like, well, the last model actually is designed to diffuse that, but I do understand that we're talking about something that has a little bit more of heightened emotion to it. And, of course, you want to be optimistic with your guest service recovery strategy, but it is essential to plan for the worst case scenario. So the first piece of it, when the guest is truly irate, is going back to the last model. And particularly in the solve category, did the solution actually resonate with the guest? Does the guest want a solution? Do they just want a sounding board where they just need to vent? And you can stand there, you can absorb it all, knowing that they're not personally attacking you. You can thank them so much for the feedback. Maybe there is just something that is kind of cathartic about yelling at a stranger for something that is not their fault. And perhaps that's the end of it. If they are, I would say if they are becoming aggressive, make sure you've got a support system around you. So ideally, you want these conversations to happen back of house, but they don't have to happen back of house alone. If you do need to escalate to leadership, yes, the goal should be to eliminate the phrase, let me get my manager, but not at the expense of actual personal safety for our employees. And I feel like that, I know that's probably a given, but I do want to make sure that, that it's stated as well, of saying, if this individual does appear to be threatening, take whatever means necessary, whether it's, getting your security team involved if you have that, or being able to have more people around you to help diffuse it. There are also instances, though, where the guest might be unreasonable or appear as if they are fishing. They are seeking compensation for something that may or may not have ever happened. They're going to give you as vague of details as possible in the interest to hopefully get someone to believe their situation. There was one story that I like to tell about this. Was I answered the phone once and a guest said, I was at the park with my boyfriend last week, and he ordered a Diet Coke because he is diabetic, and he was served a regular Coke and immediately had to be rushed to the hospital. So when this guest said this, I said, well, this is very serious. I need to learn more. Tell me more details. What day were you here? I don't know. We've been on vacation for a week now. All the days blur together. Maybe it was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I honestly don't know. I said, okay, well, which food and beverage location were you at? Well, it was the one next to the big ride. Okay, I need you to be more specific. Who was the team member? I don't remember their name. Did you stop at guest services on the way out? No, we went straight to the hospital. Do you still have your tickets? No, we threw them away. Did you pay with them? Did you buy online? Do you have a confirmation number? No, we bought them at the gate. Do you have, can I have the last 4 digits of your credit card? Well, we paid for them in cash. Do you have the receipt? No, we threw that away too. And so now I'm asking questions, showing my level of sincerity of wanting to resolve this, and then getting to a point where I did say, and part of the last model is this always give them something mindset that I've taken on, of saying, make sure there is some sort of compensation, even if it is, experiential or intangible. But I said, at the risk of not having your tickets, and they said, we don't want a refund. We just want to come back to the park. And I said, well, here's what I can do for you. I'm happy to offer you a 10% discount on 2 admission tickets to come back. They said, well, we had to leave right away. We were only there for an hour. I said, we need to have this documentation. I need to have more details. And so that went back and forth, and eventually the guest disconnected. So I think they realized, I'm going to call back and try to get somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's part of this irate, obscure, unreasonable category that I felt deserved its own module within the course.
Well, and I think it's good that you have that specific module, but I think it's also good to recognize that ideally those are not the norm, right? And I know that I got into that mode when I was at Universal, and I would read all of the complaints that came in, because I was doing service recovery classes and those type of things, and I got to really start thinking, this is how we're serving everybody. And it wasn't true. It was not true. There were far more people that were having a great time than were complaining in this unreasonable manner. So I think it's important for us to continue to recognize that and to say, don't get so caught up in those unreasonable people that you think this is how everybody's acting.
And part of that too is erring on the side of the guest. Like, yes, take all of those unreasonable and obscure complaints and divide them by your attendance. Honestly, even if you want to take the 4% rule, multiply by 25, then divide it by your attendance, and it's still a really small number.
Yeah.
And that if you err on the side of the guest with service recovery, if you have your recovery toolbox in place, maybe the guest does think they're going to pull a fast one on you, but you also know that you're protecting the assets of the business and not just comping these 2 admission tickets to a guest who may or may not have had an issue while they were in the park.
Right.
At your attraction.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. The 7th piece, the final main component of the course, has to do with growth through guest feedback. And this is about how we aggregated feedback earlier when talking about documenting and managing the process. Now saying, what are we doing continually? So this is now kind of pulling back, and this is the strategy piece of saying, how are we alleviating these friction points within our guest experience for the long term. And just a few things with that of recognizing that the solution is not the opposite of the problem. So for example, you are always going to have complaints about price. The opposite of the problem would be, well, we need to lower our prices. Well, that's not necessarily the solution, but rather demonstrating continual value. So you get your guests to say something like, that was expensive, but it was worth it.
It was worth it.
Solution is not the opposite of the problem. Instead, you want to solve for the perception rather than the complaint itself. So here we talked earlier about you said kind of like twisting it around to be able to reframe the guest's perception into making them, we use this price complaint. Oh, it's only $50 rather than, oh man, it's $50 to do X, Y, Z, or whatever that looks like. And if you do that, then that enhances satisfaction for the future. Now, as you do this, we recognize that there are always going to be guest complaints. You should always strive to get more guest complaints, which means that there is no end to the service recovery strategy. You can continue to refine it as necessary, and then in particular, optimize your feedback loop through those 4 main pillars of guest feedback, that you have this continual flow of feedback that's coming through that allows you to keep enhancing the guest experience for the long term.
And I think that's the bottom line, right? Is that the more feedback that you get, the more opportunities you have to kind of tweak your business, the more opportunities you have to maybe do something, even if it's small and incremental, to make the guest experience a little bit better, make the team member experience a little bit better. Then ultimately that's going to be good for your business in the long run, right? So that it's a very long, like when you talk about strategy, it's a long-term strategy, right? It's a long-term thought process. Like to think about it that way, instead of just saying, we're just going to get people out of the guest services office. We're just going to give them a quick refund to get them out of here so they're not yelling at somebody. It's a totally different approach.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you found this interesting and if you want to dive deeper, Service Recovery Hero hopefully helps to guide some answers to you. And particularly if you're struggling with service recovery, if your team is struggling with complaint resolution, hopefully this adds some context that you can use to be able to enhance your overall business and operational strategy, which allows you to be the hero your guests deserve. So that word hero is not there by accident. When there are amazing service recovery experiences and encounters that happen, the guest aligns that with the individual or the individuals who made that happen. And then that's their memory. So when we think about the business that we're in, we want to create memorable experience, create lasting memories. When there is a poor experience that leads to a poor memory, that leads to negative reviews, that leads to lack of intent to visit again, that leads to negative word of mouth. But through effective service recovery, what you're doing is you're replacing the memory. And through effective recovery with the toolbox, with the last model, with everything that we've talked about here, when you can replace a poor memory with a positive experience that leads to a positive memory, that outshines that negative experience that happens. And then that becomes the story that the guest tells, even if it started out with a poor experience. If you have a 5-star review on Google that said, we came to X place and then all of this happened, but then this happened, and I'm so amazed with how well they handled it, XYZ, that's a 5-star review. And that does help to influence others to visit as well, because it shows that, yes, even when things go wrong, there is the opportunity and there is the intention to be able to resolve it.
Woo! All right.
Yeah.
Now I want to go listen to Jukebox Hero by Foreigner.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
That was awesome. That was awesome. I appreciate that. Is there any thing that you can share about how to get in touch with you in terms of if people do want to learn more about Service Recovery Hero?
The link is going to be in the show notes. And guess what? If you click that link, we're going to leave that in just for fun.
Why not?
If you click that link, you're going to get 20% off of Service Recovery Hero. It is a one-time fee. You get it forever. You are welcome to share it as much as you would like internally within your organization. Please do not share it outside of your organization. If you do enjoy it, the best thing you can do is recommend it to others and send them the main link to the course as well. And again, be the hero your guests deserve.
And of course, if you don't like it, you can come complain to Josh because he's looking for all the complaints he can get.
And you know, make me take my own medicine, right? You know, put it in the
Well, Josh, this was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing so much about the service recovery strategy and the process that we should all be using in our businesses. And for everybody out there who's watching and listening, just remember, we are all attraction pros.